Telkom combined with the South African Post Office, they will completely shut down on the 6th of July, which is next week Friday. However, there will be actions prior to that, such as go slow, picketing, and so forth. So it's a build-up towards that day of the 6th of July. But having said that, all of that will be a phase one of our industrial action. For example, if I have to go into the area of the post office, workers in the post office have already compromised 2 years of no salary increase, trying to make ends meet and improve the customer-company relationship, and performed to the highest level. Up until this point in time, post office workers have not been compensated accordingly. We have come to this point where post office was doing hide and seek in terms of getting to salary negotiations and coming up with a better offer. At this point in time, they have not offered anything, so it's still zero on the table. We are there at 12%. I don't think that we should back off, because 2 years has been too much for workers to compromise. But having said all of that, all the shenanigans happening in the South African Post Office was as a result of corruption and the slow response by the politician and parliamentary to the grievances that we've raised since 2007.
Before we get to the post office, is there a window of opportunity for the employer, Telkom in this case, post office and MTN, to negotiate? Are negotiations open before the pickets start in earnest next week?
That's why we are deliberately delaying. We try to give a space to the employer to revisit their position and come back to us, because ultimately we are of the view that we have to achieve what we seek to achieve, which is salary increases. We are not the people that are trigger happy to go on industrial action, but we are saying that what is it that we can do to achieve the objective of getting decent salaries for our members. That's what we want to achieve. However, we are not hesitant to go to the streets if the company is not willing to look into the proposals that we have made.
Okay, so now with the post office, including the new acquisition of the SASSA payment for social grants, are you confident that this would be another revenue income stream, if you like, because now they'd be saving from the service provider, which was Net1 or CPS?
Well, firstly, when coming to the issue of SASSA, let us give credit to workers. Workers are the ones that went to the streets, who marched to union building, who marched to parliament, who marched to all the institutions of government, including the Tule House, demanding that SASSA contract must be given to South African Post Office. We said we are confident that the Post Office have a capacity of delivering it, even in the most remote areas. We said the appointment of CPI is related to corruption, and we are proven to be correct, because people have interest of feeding their pockets to such an extent that they forget about the poor and what post office is all about, which is to deliver service to the poor and the most downtrodden. So that's the first point. So we are very confident that post office can do that. So we see the CEO, we see everyone in post office trying to claim glory, taking out of the workers. This is the workers' victory. Having said all of that, we welcome the SASSA project, but we still feel that it must be given to post office in totality. Hence, we are calling for the amendment of the Bank Act to allow that the post office can be given a commercial banking license, because the current act dictates that the state cannot own a bank. So it is one of the issues that we are going to raise on the national shutdown around that particular.
Yes, but those kind of processes obviously will take a while. It's very cumbersome. In amending a bill, it has to be consultative. It has to be tested whether it's feasible, and then sent back to Parliament for ratification. Are the workers willing to work through that process until your salaries or demands are met?
Workers have waited, and the poor have waited for the past 23 years under the democratic dispensation. We cannot prolong this anymore. You cannot postpone eating whilst you are feeling hunger now. And we have said that the parliamentarians are very relaxed at Parliament, because that does not affect them directly. Issues of NHI, including the issue of the post bank, are very critical to us. So we have no time to waste. We have no time to wait. As workers will take these matters to the street if they do not listen. But at this point in time, something that will be able to salvage the the problem is the question that the post office must be able to give a decent salary increase at this point in time so that we can be able to move forward. But more so, the state of occupational health and safety in post office is appalling. Windows have broken down, there are no conditions. Workers are working under very dire space of situation. So we're calling all of that the revamp of the infrastructure of the South African Post Office so that we can make the function of post office easier.
And what are the minimum, I suppose, reforms or interventions that the union is willing to settle with to avoid or avert a strike?
Minimum will be that the workers that are working under a term called PTTs, which is a part-time permanent, be converted into full-time permanent employees of post office. A minimum will be that we must look at the question of salary increase, at least at a minimum of a double digit. It could be 10%, we can negotiate around that. A minimum should look at the infrastructure of post office. We want our members to work in a working environment that is conducive. So those three key areas, if can be looked into, then we'll start to look at other areas after that.
Your challenges or recommendations that you bring to the challenges of the post office and how they can remodel, considering that the core of their function had been outsourced, and that's why we've seen franchises like your Postnet, DHL, FedEx, etc., thriving because the state entity, which was the post office, was doing that function. What are your suggestions in trying to get it more competitive in this space?
No, first point is that is the business model of post office. You'll recall that post office works under the mandate of universal access, that it was given a markup to say that you cannot go beyond this pricing, which is regulated by ICASA. But in the same space, you allow the private institutions to come in at a price that is at a market rate value. So they are able to compete, and the post office will be left behind because it's unable to make their price comparable. So that's one area that must be fixed at ICASA level. But the second part, we said that we must go e-postal. Now everything has go technology-wise, and post office has to revamp along those lines. For example, people are buying online now. Post office is still waiting to send people letters from Edgar's or any other retailers. But we are saying those people who are buying online on retailers, who delivers those products to those people? It's one of the areas that the South African Post Office must explore. But also, if you look at what the state spends per annum on courier and services annually, it's over 23 billion rand. So it's a massive amount that it can be redirected into South African Post Office as the state institution. And that money can be able to be utilized in the post office to effectively drive our economy.
But that would destabilize the private sector, as you're saying, if those contracts were taken away and redirected to the post office.
We'll come to the issue of MTN now. Private sector have been participant of destabilizing our growth, our transformation, and everything else. Currently, government is the biggest employer, and I think that is abnormal. Whilst we have so many companies around that have been issued license, who are working on lucrative contracts, who are delivering services that are lucrative, but they don't employ enough South Africans, but they also investing offshore. So it shows you that we have a skew balance politically that must be revisited. In fact, we should not be shy to take the economy back to where it belongs, to the hands of the people.
But again, that is something that is not going to happen overnight. There has to be a political will, as you're saying, and considering that the South African economy is largely anchored by multinationals, conglomerates, who have obviously came here during the gold rush, etc. How do you approach it without necessarily being antagonistic to the private sector and treating that as a boogeyman?
For the past 23 years, sweetheart approach have not yielded results for us. We have experienced massive retrenchment when private sector takes over, the likes of Telkom, massive retrenchment at Transnet, Sportnet, massive retrenchment when ISCO was privatized, and so on and so forth. So workers have been at the back foot all the time. So the time has come now that workers of this country can no longer eat slogans. Workers of this country can now say, it is a time for our own new dawn. If we have to talk about new dawn and Tumamin and all of that concept, it must be a true reflection to the worker there who's out there to trying to make ends meet and giving his service to the poor. That workers must be rewarded accordingly. So I agree with you fully to say that some other areas might have taken longer than we anticipate, but there should be a progress being made towards that direction.
Okay, talk to us, MTN going there, picketing outside their premises as of the 13th of July.
This is another employer. MTN, the problem we have with MTN is that it is not an honest employer. They will sign agreement with us, but they will implement something else. They will do almost whatever it's in their power to mislead workers around the agreements that we signed. Up until this point in time, MTN has not even come to a point where it gives appropriate salary increases. There's still a lot of favoritism in that company. There's still a lot appointments which we'll call that is on the basis of favoritism. That's one area. High level of casual workers that are employed by MTN. So on the 13th of July, we intend to march to the 14th Avenue, that is the headquarters of MTN, to deliver a memorandum, but more so in all other main areas around the country, particularly in KZN, which will be Durban, in Free State, in Bloemfontein, and in Western Cape, will be picketing there. What we are demanding at MTN, of course, is a salary increase across the board. We have demanded 12% at this point in time. They have not given us a clear salary increase. In fact, others have got 5%, others 7%. So there are those irregularities. So we want for a uniform salary increase. That's what we are demanding. But more so, at MTN, there is a crisis when you go on a long sick leave because of unforeseen circumstances, where they deduct your salary, plus they take from you. So when you come back, you will be owing a company because they would have paid your medical aid. So you have to pay back all of those things. We said those policies of MTN are indeed backwards. So we have calling for reforms in those policies. So the company is taking very long to address those particular issues. So we are dealing with it now.
Okay, and then internal grievance processes. Are you saying that there is a lack of empathy or support for workers if they express their concerns around favoritism, as you're saying, that some are earning more than others, even if it's in the same position?
Well, like I've said, we have signed a number of progressive agreements with MTN, and I can tell you now, none of them has been implemented. So these are the people who will come to the table, smile with us, agree and sign. But coming to the implementation is something else. Things have been dragging for over 3 years now in terms of making sure that we convert every worker to permanent position. They have not done that. And I think what we are talking about now, we have seen across Africa where MTN has been fine, in various countries, Nigeria has been one, that there are people who are just disregard the rule of law. They just disregard everything else that has been done. We have taken to CCMA, we have won numbers of cases even into labor court, but they are reluctant in implementing some of the things that we have demanded to do.
Okay, so and what are you hoping the picket will result, or what outcome are you hoping this would come to?
In our shutdown on the 6th and the 13th respectively, we'll give a company 48 hours to come back to us with the demands that we have made. A failure to do that will embark on the second phase of our industrial action. So this is just a warning shot. But we expect that the company will come back to the table. We expect that they will negotiate in good faith and table what they can give to workers. And obviously, we'll go back to our members, demand getting the revised mandate. So when we get the revised mandates, we can come back to the media and say we accept or not accept. But our expectation from the company side is that it will come back to the table with a revised offer. Telkom above 3%, of course, you're looking at double digits. So is Post Office, and so is MTN.
And this is a protected national strike.
That's why it took so long, because we had to exhaust the internal processes. We have to exhaust the CCMA processes. We have a certificate to embark on industrial actions in all these companies. So it's a well-protected industrial action. So on the 6th, as we'll be marching to Union Building, we'll via Post Office, we'll via Telkom, we'll via Treasury, and the Department of Telecommunication and Postal Services.
Yeah, so to what extent can we anticipate connectivity or disruption to connectivity as consumers, especially small business that rely on Wi-Fi, etc.?
Well, I think that question can be answered by the business. What we know is that our workers are people that are very committed to their work. So if they are not at work, there could be some disruptions because of their performance. So we expect that without any sabotage, of course, we expect that it will not be a smooth sailing in those companies because a bulk of our members will be out in the streets.
Okay, and what's that number? That if you give us a figure of your representative or representation in numbers of members.
Well, we expect plus minus, if we collectively look into all companies, we expect just over 12,000 people to embark on the industrial action. But what is also encouraging is that in Telkom, SACU, the other union, has joined hands with us to fight this company. In Post Office, SAPAU, and also TIPACU, which are two other unions, have joined hands with us to fight against the Post Office. So the number could double as we move forward.
Does the no work, no pay policy apply, albeit it's a protected strike?
Yes, the no work, no pay does apply, even though we, as workers, we view that it's happening every day. Because at the payday, we don't even see our salaries because how small it is, the VAT has gone up, and petrol prices have gone up. So we experience the no work, no pay on a daily basis.
Okay, we're going to leave it there, Mr. Shabalala. As always, appreciate your time. And joining us is Aubrey Shabalala from the Communications Workers Union as the Secretary General, saying that the union, together with other sympathy organizations, will be embarking on a strike starting next Friday and on the 13th as well. Still on the strike